All right. So here we are. Welcome. It looks like the technology is working, which is grand. That's very helpful, very reassuring. Hello, my name is Ted, as you might have gathered if you've ended up here already. But if you don't, welcome. My name's Ted, and I am here because I am a cognitive behavioural therapist, but also a father of three. And both of those two things are relevant for today. For this stream, I've turned off the chat function because it's the first one in this series that I'm doing. Haven't used it yet, so I thought, Ted, give yourself a break, try and deliver the stuff, and maybe in future ones there'll be the ability to ask questions and stuff. So I hope you can bear with me through this one. What we're doing today is how to help an anxious child. Part of the reason I am doing that is because most of my work is with adults, and I work with anxiety in particular. But I share quite a lot of information about anxiety and how to understand it online. And a lot of the questions I was getting were about, would this apply to a child, or how would this apply to a child? But also, because I am a father of three, I have found all the things that I use in my work so personally helpful for myself, but particularly when it comes to helping my kids. And I wanted to share that, really. So that's led me down this road. Most of my work is still one-to-one with adults, but now I work with parents as well to help them understand what's going on for their child. And I also do talks for schools and businesses. And this is a condensed version of a talk that I've run a few times on exactly this subject. So I think that's probably all I need to do to set us up. Let's get going on what we're going to cover. We're going to cover what is anxiety and why does it happen, just sort of a brief overview there. We're going to cover some of the main forms of anxiety, because in my experience, if you don't know kind of what it is, some types of anxiety seem really understandable. We all kind of know what it feels like. For example, to feel a little bit nervous in social situations. We can all get our heads around that. But with things like perhaps OCD, or when somebody's having panic attacks, if you don't know what that is, or you haven't had that experience yourself, perhaps that's a little bit harder to get your head around. So let's get on with it. The final thing we're going to talk about, obviously, is what can you do? So that's the final thing we're going to do as well. But let's start with, what is it? Oh, I keep banging my desk, and so it's making me wobble around a bit. What is anxiety? How does it work? First and foremost, we use this term anxiety to mean different things a lot of the time. So I just want to clarify what I'm using it for. The term anxiety in this little series, or this little session, this one part of this ongoing series of webinars, is about the physical and mental response that we have to threat. So the anxiety response, the thing that happens in your body and your brain when your mind has spotted danger. That's the idea. I think sometimes people use the term anxiety to mean a specific thing for them. So I am experiencing anxiety, I'm worrying a lot, for example, but it's kind of a broad umbrella term is how we're using it today to cover everything from a little bit of worry through to full-blown panic. It's part of the same anxiety response, the fight or flight response, which is something that we will use, another term that we will use. So what it is there for is to help us deal with threat. So, for example, if there's a tiger in the room, we need to be able to get away. So we need to fight the tiger or run away. So your body will prepare you. So your heart will start beating a bit faster. I've got it on here somewhere. Your heart rate will increase. Your breathing rate will increase. And what your body is trying to do is get oxygen into the bloodstream to your muscles to try and make you be able to work efficiently. So muscles working fast so that you can fight or run. Hopefully run, I think, in the tiger's case. But we can understand that when it comes to a tiger, but often when we're having the same kind of physical response to something that isn't a tiger, so I don't know, going to school or perhaps being late or doing an exam, where's the tiger? That is the bit that can sometimes be confusing. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. Before we do, let's talk about some of the other physical things that happen when this thing has been set off. So heart rate we've spoken about, breath we've spoken about. You might get a bit shaky, bit sort of nervous. We associate with our nerves sweat. You might start sweating. Your body is anticipating you using a lot of energy. So same as when you're exercising, if you go for a run, your body will sweat. It's trying to get rid of the excess heat that's being built up. It is anticipating you doing that when you're anxious. It's anticipating you running or fighting. That might be why you sweat. Your stomach might go funny, so it might feel a bit churned up, or it might feel tense and sort of clenched like this. Or you might need to go to the toilet or feel the need to go to the toilet. That is part of this system as well. Function, I'm not so obvious. Maybe that's just because the blood supply is going elsewhere to your muscles. Maybe there's a survival element to it too, because if you lose control of your bowels, maybe the tiger doesn't want to eat you, something like that. What else we got? Even dizzy. So there's a couple of other things that we maybe don't associate quite so much with feeling nerves. Typically at the lower end of the scale, when we're feeling just a little bit nervous, it's stomach is the thing that you might feel, maybe a little bit sweaty, maybe a little bit tense. Shoulders tense is another one. You're getting ready to sort of spring into action. That's what's happening there. Later on, that can cause pain if you're holding yourself like this for ages. But you might even get dizzy. So if the anxiety response gets really high, so let's say there is literally a tiger in the room, your blood's pumping so much that you might feel dizzy. You might even, this is one that can really scare people sometimes if it happens, when it's at the top end of anxiety, like 10 out of 10 anxiety, you can even get this feeling that you're a bit detached from reality, like things aren't really happening to you. And that can really scare people sometimes, but it is a normal part of the anxiety response. So fundamentally, that's what it is. What it's for is getting your body to prepare to fight or to run. Fight, flight, or possibly freeze in place. So sometimes when we're really scared of something, you might find yourself completely freezing up. That's a normal part of the anxiety response too. There's a fourth one over here, which is fawn. This might be relevant if your child is dealing with bullies, for example. You might see that your child your head goes down, eyes go down. If there's a dog that is faced with another aggressive dog, sometimes the dog sort of does this. It's kind of a submission way of dealing with the threat. I don't want to get hurt, so I'm just going to submit, I suppose. That's another internal inbuilt response. That is what anxiety is. Inbuilt response to dealing with threat. Problem is, there isn't always tiger about, so how do we explain that? Some of how we would explain that is tigers, or avoiding tigers, is not the only way that we survive. I'm not going to flip this yet, actually. We also have to be able to anticipate danger. So it's not good enough to react when the tiger's here. Sometimes it's helpful for your brain to be able to anticipate what if there's a tiger. If you're walking through the jungle, somebody says there's tigers in this jungle, and then you hear a twig snap behind you, it is probably helpful for your brain, part of your brain, to be going, what if that's a tiger? Because if you can react before it's happened, then we've avoided the danger. It's too late when the tiger's already here. So brains are naturally supposed to be looking ahead for what if. And it's if it sees some possible danger, it will kick this off to get you ready to avoid it. That is usually what's happening in anxiety. But it's not only tigers. We want to avoid tigers because they're a threat to our health. Anything else that is a threat to our health is also something that your brain will be on the lookout for. So health or illness might be put in that regard. Something that might cause us physical pain. So again, if you're at school and there's somebody that hurts you, you will be anxious about going there again. Of course you will. It might be the health of other people, our little clan, our little tribe. So your parents or people around you might worry about those things. That again makes sense. It might be also another way that we survive is by having resources. So if you've made a good old stash of bananas and you've kept them somewhere and then you come back and all your bananas are gone, that is scary. That is a risk to your life, because what if I can't feed myself? What if my shelter or my food is gone? So sometimes as adults, when we're worrying about money, that is how we can understand, why is my body kicking off as if there's a tiger in the room when I've just had a bill or when I'm thinking about work? It can be the same for children. So if they're worried about losing their home, whatever that might look like, that can be part of it too. Or being away from their home. So sometimes sort of separation from parents, sometimes that's one way we can understand it. If they're not used to that yet and they don't yet know that it's still going to be there even if I'm not there, then maybe that'll be part of it. And then finally, quite a big one is being in a group. So we are social mammals, and part of how we survive is we want to be in a group. So if there's any threat to my place in the group, if I feel like I'm going to be rejected or laughed at, humiliated, that is a primal thing. None of us like that. That's probably why most of us don't like the idea of doing stand-up. Why some people wouldn't like this. Why my body's reacting a little bit as I'm doing this. We don't like the idea of rejection. We don't like that. Sometimes that comes out as simple as that. If we're getting picked on or being frozen out a little bit at school, maybe that helped us understand why the child's anxious. Or just fundamentally going somewhere new with new people is inherently a bit scary. Final thing to think about is that we all have different experiences. So one way of understanding why a child might be particularly anxious about any of these things can be through, if you were to touch something really hot when you were a kid, it was bright red and it burned your hand, brains are supposed to hold on to that information and go, look out for that again. Same thing works with any other experience. You're more likely to worry about health if you've seen what can happen to people. You are more likely to worry about social situations if you've been picked on or laughed at before. That makes sense. It might leave you in a position where you're constantly worrying about stuff where it feels like there's nothing to worry about here, but it does make sense when you understand where it's come from. We'll use that as we go forward. All right, let's talk about the next bit. A little bit of an overview of some of the most common types of anxiety. Little swig first. So I've put on here what makes it a problem. What's the difference between anxiety and an anxiety problem is one of the questions that comes up quite a lot. And really, to me, I would say they are not two separate things. They are on a spectrum. So we all experience some level of anxiety. For example, we could all understand some social nerves, like if you'd feel a bit nervous in a networking situation or a public speaking situation, and your child is really nervous about meeting any new people, that is sort of part of the same spectrum. It's not exactly the same, but it's part of the same spectrum. Anxiety is a normal, useful, and essential response, but sometimes it's being set off so much that it's actually getting in my way. So how do we kind of judge when it's becoming an anxiety problem is simply the intensity and the impact. How much is it affecting me? And is it stopping me from living my life? That's what we're after. When we look at it, it will still be understandable. We just want to bring it back to a level where it's not getting in the way so much anymore. So there's general things that children or young people might get anxious about, which we could all maybe get our heads around. So exams, meeting new people, things like that, maybe school. But these are some of the headings of the anxiety problems that might be worth having a look at. I've put some links in the description to some videos about each of these, if any of them ring a bell, because part of finding the right help or finding the way through is identifying what do we think is going on. Generalized anxiety is probably the least known term of the most common form of anxiety, which is chronic worry. Just not being able to switch off, just constantly having a what if, what if, what if. And it doesn't settle necessarily for ages on one thing. So it might be about health one week. It might be about being late another week. It might be about schoolwork another time or friendships another time. It kind of moves around. That's why we call it generalized anxiety. Some of what you'll notice, if that's what's going on, is simply an inability to switch off and wanting to know. So, and kind of intolerance to uncertainty. I want to know how things are going to go. If you're going somewhere new, they want to know where it's going. If there's going to be something about an exam, they want to know all the details about the exam. Where's it going to be? What's going to happen? I think all of us want that to some degree, but it would just be a heightened need to know everything. Social anxiety does what it says on the tin. Feeling really nervous about social situations, maybe to the point where actually you can't engage with things, or you feel like you can't speak, or you're so self-conscious that you're kind of frozen in place. That's social anxiety. Most of your anxiety being about social situations and how you're coming across. Health anxiety does what it says on the tin again. Most of the anxiety being about health, specifically health issues that might long-term result in death. So as in, I will be ill for a long time and I will lose function. So it tends to be about long-term illnesses. Whereas if you compare that to panic, often with panic, there's something here that makes me feel like something catastrophic is going to happen now, either perhaps a heart attack or I'm going to pass out. All of that makes me panic. That heightens the anxiety response, which brings with it symptoms that look like a heart attack or feel like I'm going to pass out. And then it's a big cycle that keeps itself going. OCD is probably the one that people understand the least, but when you get your head around it, it does make sense. Usually what that is about is having intrusive thoughts, scary thoughts in your mind about something happening, either you doing something to somebody else or terrible things happening to other people. It might just be a thought about somebody getting ill. It might be a thought about what if I've got germs on my hands and what if I pass that on to somebody? Or it might be, what if I shouted something really inappropriate here? Fundamentally, OCD is about how somebody then feels about the fact that they've had those thoughts. Either I've had those thoughts that means it's going to happen. I've had those thoughts that means I'm a bad person. or I've had those thoughts, that means I'm going to lose control and I'm going to do something. So then they feel like they have to do something to get rid of all of that. So they have to counteract those thoughts in some way, stop the bad thing from happening. And they get a bit stuck, either perhaps checking things, doing things in a particular way, or doing things in their mind to try and get rid of those thoughts. Again, there's a video in the description. PTSD is what happens when something very, very traumatic happens and it kind of sticks with you. So typically we think about combat, so sort of soldiers, but it can happen from a car crash. It can happen from anything where you felt like your life or the life of somebody else was in danger in particular. Those things tend to be so big that it's very hard for your brain to kind of just process. Sometimes what that means is it's not a memory. It's not something that's happened. Every time you're reminded of it, it's as if it's happening right now. It's very intense. Again, more in my video. And then phobias. So phobias of being sick, phobias of spiders, phobias of heights. That's another specific form of anxiety as well. There we are. There's our little overview of some of the types of anxiety. Just in case there's any of those that ring bells for you, you can find some specific information. Everything we're going to talk about what to do, which is what's coming next, is relevant. But you might find more specifically what's going to work for these things if you know what's going on. All right, let's do a little bit about what do we do. So, I'd like to frame this a little bit first. Because as a parent, you are in a different position to a therapist. It is one of the great tragedies of my life that I have a load of information that I can help other people, and my kids probably don't really want to listen to me. That is, let's just put that out on the table. That is hard dynamic to kind of go around. So we're going to talk about what to do, but I think it's important also to talk a little bit about how do you maybe help this land, because it's not always that easy. So let's start with the theory of what would be helpful to do. I would suggest normalize first. We're going to talk about emotional reassurance, talk about that in a sec, and then we're going to talk about the practical things to do. I think as a parent or any adult trying to help a child, all we really want to do is make them feel better. So sometimes what we do is we lead with, why don't you do this? Either, I don't know, they're telling us a worry they're having about their health, like, do you think this headache is something serious? And where we might want to go straight with it is, no, I don't think it's serious, or give them something useful to do. That is a good instinct. We want to make it okay, but sometimes it doesn't land properly. And the reason sometimes it doesn't land properly is because when you're anxious, it's not really possible to be calmed down purely by logic all the time. If you come home stressed from work and you tell your partner or somebody, oh, I had this really horrible thing going on today, I'm really stressed about it. And they say, don't be worried about that. It's not a big deal. Do you immediately go, great, thanks? Or does it perhaps make you feel like, right, well, how I'm feeling is stupid then, or silly? Is that what you're saying? And we don't mean to say that, but it's sometimes how it comes across. The other reason I'm really going to emphasize the importance of normalizing an emotional reassurance is because this is a long game, helping somebody change the way that they feel. And to begin with, we're going to introduce loads of practical stuff that they can do, but to begin with, they're not going to be able to do it straight away. And in the meantime, they're left with the anxiety. Our first aim, helping a child with their anxiety, is making it clear that it is normal to feel this way, that it's absolutely okay to talk about, and it's absolutely okay to ask for help. If we can do that, that sets us up for being able to actually give them some stuff that helps. If instead how they feel about it is it's shameful, nobody gets it, and I'm on my own, it's impossible to get in there. So we want them to feel it's okay. So we want to start with normalizing and emotional reassurance. Let's tell you what I mean by this word, emotional reassurance. In any form of anxiety, one of the most common things that someone will be doing, whether it's a child or an adult, is asking for reassurance or trying to get reassurance themselves by checking or researching things. So what they'll often do is come to a parent and say, do you think this is okay? Do you think this is all right? Or I'm worried about this. Or we'll get the anger. So they'll be like, I don't want to go to school today. And really what's going on is I'm worried about what I'm wearing, or I'm worried about something that's coming up and I don't know how it's going to go. What we want to do is normalize how they feel. One of the ways you can do that is make it okay to talk about it by asking about it. Are you feeling a bit nervous today? Do you want to tell me a little bit about what you're worried about? Which, again, saying that out loud, they may or may not want to do. But still, you are giving the message that this is okay. Emotional reassurance is instead of trying to answer the questions, we can give them an answer to the question, that's fine, but we're not going to lead with that. We're going to lead with things that help them soothe their body. So instead of just pure logic, like this is why you don't need to worry about that, we're going to say, are you feeling anxious? And with our tone and with our physicality, we're going to make them feel like they're not on their own. If there is a scared animal, you don't calm it down by explaining rationally what needs to happen or what they need to think about. You use your tone of voice and you use your body language. And that is soothing. That's not only you helping them, that is also you modeling kind of what we want them to be able to do for themselves, which is to be able to use a slow tone of voice to be able to soothe. And that is what we want them to be able to do when they are feeling scared. If you're feeling scared, I want you to feel that you're not on your own and that it's all right to feel this way. And we're in this together. That's massive. The reason I think that's quite important is because sometimes I think as parents, we feel guilty if we don't have the answers and we can't stop them feeling anxious. But that's not always fair. You can't always do that. What you can always do is offer this. You're not alone. You can specifically say, it is normal to feel this way. It is completely reasonable to feel this way. Even when you don't understand the child's anxiety, that is a helpful thing to say. You might say, look, I don't necessarily understand exactly what's happening for you, but you wouldn't understand everything that's happening for me either. What I do know is to feel anxious and to feel nervous is completely normal. That's what we want. And you might share. Again, I'd say hit and miss on this one, but it's a favorite strategy of mine, either in the moment or possibly later on when things are kind of okay, to share examples of the things that you get anxious about, just to make it really, really clear. Can be a big story, or it can just be you saying, you know what, today I got a bit nervous at work, or today I got a bit stressed about this thing. You don't have to make it a big thing and make it a big conversation about it. Just dropping in that this is normal. One of the most common fears I get from adults who are anxious is, am I going to pass this on to my child? And what I always want to say is, you're a good example. Your child is going to feel anxious about something at some point in their life. But luckily with you, they've got somebody who's felt that way. And hopefully can give them the impression this is okay to feel that even the biggest and bravest people feel that way sometimes. So with that as our foundation, let's talk about what we can actually do. All right. So number one, I've put facing it here, but let's come back to that in a minute. Physical things, gentle questioning and attention. So some of the things we might be able to say, once we've said it is normal to feel this way, we might be able to say, I've got some ideas about what might help or what helps me when I know that it's anxiety. Shall we talk about that? One of those things is breathing, just sort of physical things, in the moment things to do, breathing. Just taking a few deep breaths. Dropping your shoulders, so posture-wise. This is anxious posture. This is what your body wants to do once the hedgehog wants to curl up. What we can do is open it up. Open shoulders, drop your shoulders, lift your chin up, and take a few breaths. You can name it, you can explicitly state, this is a useful thing to try and do. Shall we just take a moment to breathe? Or you can do it with them while you're giving them a hug. You're doing it by showing them, by breathing slowly yourself. That's particularly helpful with younger children. Gentle questioning. So I would say there is no harm in you introducing stuff like, you know, actually, I don't think this is a big thing to worry about. But it works better if you first said it is completely reasonable to be worried about this. It's completely reasonable to feel anxious about this. Let's just have a think about it. So, for example, if a child is worried about school and about whether or not what they're wearing is going to be okay, whether anybody's going to have something to say about it, you might say, look, I totally understand why you'd be worried about that. I worry about that sometimes too. What helps me is to remember that maybe people aren't paying as much attention to what I am wearing as I think they are. That's what I mean. So we're not going straight in with the stop worrying about what everybody else is thinking and dismissing it. We're saying it does make sense that you're worried about it. Here's something that might help. You are allowed to do that. Or if it's health anxiety. So when this is quite a difficult one to give somebody an answer on, right? Is this symptom something to worry about? You might say, I can completely get why you are worried about it. I worry about those health things sometimes too. Can I tell you what I would think about this particular symptom? So if it was a headache, I might say something like, if I had a headache for days and days, I would really think I need to get this checked out. But sometimes when it's a headache, it's because I'm a little bit dehydrated, or I've been looking at a screen for too long. So maybe what we could do is we could drink some water, see if it goes, and if it doesn't, we'll keep monitoring it. And if it really doesn't go away, then we'll go and see a doctor. What do you think? Something along those lines. Attention is helpful too. So when we're a bit stressed about something or something's worrying us, another way of dealing with anxious thoughts is moving your attention. So we can introduce this. So particularly in social anxiety, your attention goes inward. So if you feel awkward, it feels like, I don't know where to put my hands. What do people do with their hands normally? That kind of thing. And everything feels very awkward. And some of that is because your attention is on your body. Same in health anxiety. Your attention is on the symptom you can feel. If you are worried, your attention, if you're worrying about things, your attention is often off in the future about what might happen. If they're worried before school, they're thinking about what might happen. What we might say is, it makes sense that you're worried about this. Sometimes what it's helpful to do is when your attention's gone off into the future, bringing it back to what's going on in front of you. So that might mean getting out of the house and going for a walk and just paying attention to what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel. In social anxiety, if your attention keeps going into your body, see if you can notice what's going on around you. Pay attention to what you can hear, what people are saying, what people are doing. And it's just a little bit easier to not be totally tangled up in what your mind's trying to do. It's just a little bit easier. This is mindfulness approaches. So if you want to know any other examples there, any mindful exercises would give that kind of impression. Bringing your attention back to the here and now, or what's going on outside of you, can be really helpful. Finally, let's talk about longer term. How do you help somebody improve the anxiety overall? This is how to kind of deal with it in the moment. But how do we get to a point where I'm no longer as anxious about it in the first place? And typically this happens by facing it. So we've all probably had experience of this. Odds are you've had experience in your life of dealing with something where you were very anxious to begin with, and it got better as it went along. It might be public speaking. It might be the first day of a new job where you felt nervous to begin with, but after, day 50, it was all right. We've all had that. This is called exposure, or this is the CBT terminology for it. So what happens when we face a thing that we are afraid of over and over again is that our brain is able to say, this is scary, this is scary, this is scary, something's going to happen, something's going to happen. Hold on, nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. Oh, we're okay. And it will happen over and over and over again. Normally, if things go well with a school or a new school, the child will be very anxious for the first sort of few days, but what will happen is it will usually sort of settle down by about maybe mid-morning, mid-late morning, unless something happens during the day. It's the morning that's the worst. The anxiety comes down. They keep repeatedly going to school, and eventually their body has learned this isn't that bad. So you can do that with anything. If a child is afraid of germs, you can say, okay, right, we can see that this is really getting in your way and you're washing your hands like 10 times a day. What if we could get used to just having a little bit of dirt on our hands and leaving it? And what if we can just build that gradually? So get used to a little bit of dirt on your hands and leaving it and feeling what that's like and finding that actually, eventually it becomes okay. Same with social situations. You can gradually help them face things if you can. With school, it can often be difficult. They're either in school or not, right? But often schools will work with you to try and make it less scary. So you don't have to sit in the middle of the classroom. Maybe at the beginning, you can sit at the edge and just see how long you can make. And if we can get that, and we can keep improving that, we can keep helping you feel more confident and that maybe it's okay, that will head in the right direction. Taking it one step at a time. This 3-10 thing I've written down here, for small children, a way to explain that, I like to use the magic numbers. So the idea that, did you know about the magic numbers? The magic numbers are 3, 10, and 100. If you do something 3 times, you start to feel a tiny bit better about it. If you do something 10 times, you start to be able to notice that you feel better about it. If you do it 100 times, it becomes okay. That is a nice way of being able to explain this process without going into how that works. And it's a nice way for them to check in with themselves about, how many times have I done this now? Am I feeling better? And you've got a language to be able to talk to them about it. And finally, they don't have to do it on their own. You don't have to send them in. You can do this together. If there's something they're scared of and there's something that you're a little bit uncomfortable with, you can do it together, and that can help them feel like they're not doing it completely on their own. Oh, that's all my stuff. There's always more to say. But as I say, this is part of an ongoing series. There's going to be one of these every month. and then there's the option to access another one for paid subscribers. You can also find some more in some of the courses that I run about anxiety, and there's a load of other free videos in the description below if you want to know any more about any of the specific forms of anxiety. I hope you found it helpful, but let me know. Thanks very much.